Welcome to Storytelling for Social Media, and we're going to jump right in. I'm your host, Melissa Balmer, the founder of Petal Love, where I create storytelling tools, tips, and coloring pages to help you grow more active, mindful mobility, and a much more sustainable world. And I also work with organizations and individuals, coaching them to become more compelling and engaging storytellers, whether it's for social media, for classes, webinars, and especially for live presentations. This presentation is about 18 minutes long, and then we'll have 12 minutes at the end for your questions. So I will take those at the end, but make sure you text them to me as they come up if you don't want to forget them. There are 3 things that I'm going to ask you to give yourself a gift of right now. The first is, I know you'll be tempted to be checking emails and texts and a myriad of other things while you listen to me today, but I'm asking that you reconsider and give yourself the gift of shutting off everything else and just listen. This will allow you to absorb the information that I'm sharing with you from thought leaders and culture shift organizations, and it'll allow you to ask better questions at the end. The second gift I want to ask you to give yourself today is that you give yourself permission to consider yourself a creative, even if you've never considered yourself that before. Everyone is a creative, and when you embrace yourself as a creative, that's when storytelling magic can start to unfold for yourself. And the third gift that I want to ask you to give yourself today as we move through this presentation is to ask yourself, what tools of this could you use starting tomorrow? That's right. How could you use this starting tomorrow? Now, why is storytelling one of the most powerful tools that you can use? It turns out that our brains are wired for stories. It's in our DNA. Facts don't change hearts and minds, and we can't even remember them very well. Only stories do. Writer and cultural anthropologist Catherine Batesett summed it up beautifully when she shared that the human species thinks in metaphors and learns through stories. Stories are how we humans make sense of things. And to better understand the power of the science behind storytelling, I've created a short, sweet 3-minute video on my YouTube channel that I share as a link at the end of this webinar. So what I'm going to demystify for you today are the 3 ways that thought leaders and culture shift brands are using storytelling in their social media to catalyze connectivity and exponentially expand their reach. And the first case study I'm sharing with you today is Autumn Peltier. She is an Indigenous teen from northeastern Canada who was nominated last year for the Nobel Peace Prize for her work on water conservation. Chances are, though, you haven't heard of her. Chances are you've heard of Greta Thunberg instead. Now, here's something interesting. Autumn has been working in conservation for a few years. Greta only began her climate strike not this last August, but a year ago August, and she too is now nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. But why have you heard of one of these talented teens and not the other? Well, Greta is white. She's from Sweden, where they pay a lot of attention in the media to what's going on with climate change. She speaks fluent English, and she's been able to travel through Europe to promote her cause. And the European media is something that the United States pays attention to much more than the Canadian. But the biggest reason that we know about Greta is that Greta gets intuitively how to tell stories on Twitter. And Twitter is the platform for thought leaders and media spokespeople and the journalists who are looking at them. It's estimated that about 8 million people marched in the 2 different climate strikes over the past few weeks. That's more people marching around the world in protest of something than ever before in the history of our planet. And most of them were youth who found out about the climate strikes through Greta Thunberg and especially her Twitter feed. So likes are something that are important. They're a start. But in order to truly create synergy with social media and truly have it be a valuable platform for you, you've got to have the people that are following you retweet, repost, share your email newsletters, quote you. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How is it that these people do this? The first thing we're going to talk about today is how to shift from pushing to engaging. How to easily create more visual allure. And third, how to better multi-purpose your content, because we're all very busy and we've got a lot going on, and social media, all the different platforms, can really, really feel overwhelming. But the most important tip that I want to share with you today, the thing that I really want you to remember, is that great social media is a great curated conversation. It's not so much about talking at, but listening to. It's about connecting rather than engaging, not talking at, and importantly, all of the people that are really doing great things with social media are following the 80-20 rule of modern marketing. The 80-20 rule is that you are sharing useful tips and information focused on your interests that are also the interests of your fans and followers, and only 20% of your time in social media is directly actually promoting yourself. So how do you shift from pushing to engaging with your social media? How do you do that? One of the key things, these are 3 more things that the thought leaders are doing. The first is they ask thoughtful questions. They ask thoughtful questions in response to popular and or controversial media stories, giving us all the opportunity to think more deeply and from fresh angles about a subject. This case study here is from the environmental writer Mary Anais Helgar, who was posting in response to author Jonathan Franzen's piece in The New Yorker a couple of weeks ago, proclaiming that the upcoming climate apocalypse was here and there was nothing that we could do about it. She writes, "What if doomerism and relentless hope are 2 sides of the same emotionally immature, overprivileged coin?" She goes on in the quote to say further things and then shares her own very thoughtful blog on the climate crisis. You can see here that she had 174 retweets at the time that she posted this. And since I have clipped this, it is at least doubled in the number of retweets. She is really a dynamic person that you should know about on social media. So again, likes are a start, but they're not what moves the dial. What moves the dial are shares. The second thing they do is that they share compelling stories with pull quotes that they know their fans and followers will find of interest. And they focus on people. This is from the League of American Bicyclists, who is doing a great job on Twitter right now. And this is highlighting the story of cyclist Patricia Nurel, from Outside Magazine. It's not the League's magazine, it's Outside Magazine, who didn't start biking until she was 51. You can see they got 25 retweets on that, which is really nice. And the third one is I'm sharing, yes, from you, Jim. I picked this up from your Facebook. This is Jim Brown, the former executive director of the Sacramento Area Bike Advocates in California. And this is a Facebook post where he is sharing some important information about an upcoming meeting of land use that's going before the Sacramento City Council. And it includes situations about biking, walking, and transit. And at the end of this, you can ask Jim, at the end of the presentation, you can ask Jim directly about it. He's sharing important details, contact information, and in the complete post, he's organizing people to ride together to the meeting. So think of yourself as a funnel for the information you're paying attention to, that you're passionate about, that will also be important to your fans and followers. You're saving them time and energy by highlighting what's really important to them. Now let's talk about creating easy visual allure. And the reason that this is so important for social media is that the brain registers images 60,000 times faster than just text alone. If you're going to be on social media, you really need to be using engaging images along with them. So this is a tweet that's sharing some of my own illustrations that I created in advance of September 22nd as World Car Free Day. It generated 22 retweets. It was one of my top tweets for the past month. And also, I used that tool of asking a question to have people feel more engaged. And I got a lot of really interesting responses. It was a lot of fun. So when you create your visual allure, one of the things I want you to think about doing is creating a style guide for your social media. And this is your brand's style story, but I want to ask you to put story first when you're thinking about a style guide rather than just making it pretty. And this is the way that you keep the look and feel of your social media consistent with the rest of your brand's presence so that it matches what's going on with your website, your email newsletters, your print pieces, any promotions. But if you've never done a style guide before, starting just with your social media is a great way to get started. Now, I have done a baby steps guide to doing a style guide, and I also use Canva, which is a fantastic resource. And at the end of this, I've shared both the link to my baby step blog and to the more in-depth Canva, how to create a style guide. And when you're creating a style guide for your social media, I want you to think outside the box for the look and feel. And again, Canva shares a lot of fantastic templates for all kinds of social media posts and any type of outreach that you can do. It's really easy for people that are professionals in the world of biking, walking, and transit, the nonprofits, the advocates, people that are selling bike products to get really siloed into a particular look and feel. And I like to think outside of the box and see who is really creating culture change with their style. I like to learn from branding experts like Kat Conroy, who has a fabulous and free Instagram makeover course that has really helped me. And yes, I share that at the end of this presentation. So when you're creating easy visual allure and you're taking pictures of people, start limiting the number of people in your images. We love to show that we've got teams of people, we've got all kinds of people working together with us, and we had a great time in a ride, an event, a conference, a summit. That's overwhelming to people. Think about the fact that magazines, print magazines, and leading social media thought leaders are only sharing up to, say, 3 people in their images. And why is that? Because people are relating to the one-on-one stories of people, not of groups. That's also why when we're fundraising, it's more powerful to talk about one person's story rather than the millions of people that you're going to help. So everyone that shows up at events, rides, classes, meetings, summits, buys products from you, has a story. Capture these people, tell their stories. This is one of the most famous photos that I've ever been engaged with. And I'm not a photographer, and I'm not usually the model, but I am really good at styling and hosting photo shoots. This is my friend Kelly Morris back from 2014. It wasn't a shoot for a particular story. It was just that she had recently become a league certified instructor. And because she was a former IT person that had trained people around the world, she became a top trainer almost overnight, an in-demand person, and she was fantastic at it. And I knew a lot of people would love to see pictures of her. We got all kinds of pictures of Kelly that we used in all kinds of media, and her pictures were used by other organizations for their events, their summit, and everything. Our talented photographer, Lisa Beth Anderson, did an amazing job with this. And again, don't assume who's going to be photogenic and fun to have in photos. People of all ages, all backgrounds, all races can be really dynamic visually. Show a diverse array. And tell, again, the stories of the people in the pictures. That's what's going to give your images their authenticity. This is an image of Bernard Serrano from Long Beach, where I used to live. And this is a photo shoot that we organized for the 2014 Bike Fest Vintage Fashion Show that I hosted for our local business district. And Bernard was the one that actually inspired the fashion show. He hosts one of the largest vintage bike rides in the country every month, and he is always in some sort of vintage character, and he has over 100 vintage bikes. So again, tell the stories of the people in your community that are showing up. You have some wonderful characters, just like Bernard. So as I wrap up on Easy Visual Allure, I'm going to go right into how to better multi-purpose your content. And I'm going to invite you all to consider organizing photo shoots by using your own events as photo shoot opportunities. I've done dozens and dozens of photo shoots, and the reason why Long Beach jumped onto the stage of bike friendliness back in 2009, 2010 was not only did a lot of us pitch stories to the media, but we had the images to go with them, and many of them were from the very talented and generous Alan Crawford, who I've worked with so much. This photo is of a gentleman by the name of Cliff Sharkey and his ex-wife, who I don't remember her name, unfortunately, but I wanted to share them because they were so fantastic, and this is such a beautiful photo. Again, show people of all ages, and they are wearing their own outfits, and they had two of the rarest early vintage bikes in the country. So if you're going to host a photo shoot from an event, just make sure that you let people know in advance that that's what you're going to do. And get individual stories of different people. Get them on their bikes, get them walking, riding the bus, whatever you do. Get full body, get close up. And if you're not good with your camera, go ahead and hire somebody or have several volunteers take pictures and then later see what you get. Now, when you multi-purpose your content, you want to start with your strongest place where your writing really sings. In my case, things come together for me best when I'm writing an email newsletter. Then I make it into a blog. And from that, I break it up into different pieces. And I use Canva to format the different sizes, whether it's a Facebook post, whether it's going to be Instagram, whether it's going to be Twitter. So again, I'm thinking of a funnel. I start large and then I go down into narrow. But you've got to be aware of reposting apps. And the reason for this is, and I share my friend Silvana's BC Bits here, and she posted this, she used a reposting app from Instagram to Twitter. And this was just yesterday. And as you can see, the photo does not show. That's one of the problems of reposting apps, is that they will repost and you'll only get, whether it reposts to Facebook or Instagram or whatever, you'll just get this text. And that kind of kills it. It really doesn't tell the story, and that's not what your intention was. So if you're using a reposting app, make sure it's doing the photo as well. Instead of using a reposting app, what I like to do, again, is use Canva, and it easily reformats one of your favorite images to different sizes, and then you can easily make sure everything works out for that kind of, for the right image. So this was the same piece of art that I used for World Carb Free Day, and I just reformatted it on Canva for Twitter at the top, for Instagram at the left, and then for Facebook on the right. And then I could easily also change the background color and play with it. As busy people, social media can be overwhelming, especially if you feel like you have to have a boot in each camp on each platform. I do not have good experience with Hootsuite. I know some people do. It tends to crash whatever computer that I've been working on. Instead, when I'm doing social media for others, I organize it through an online platform called Zoho, which is the only one that I found that also does a good job of having an app that you can download to repost on Instagram. And so that's what I recommend you consider doing. And again, when you're using your visual content, you've got all your photos from your photo shoot, and you're posting to different social media platforms, you want to make sure that you're telling the stories of the people in the photos. That's what people are really, really going to be interested in. Oh, excuse me. Again, I wanted to share that this was from the League of American Bicyclists, and they did a great job of sharing about the Minnesotan who's becoming the biking ambassador for the Black community. And again, this is the league sharing not from their own email newsletters, their own media. This is from the Star Tribune. So they're listening to what's going on in diverse bike culture across the country, and they're bringing that story forward to the thousands of people that follow them on Twitter and other places. And this, at the time that I captured this, had 7 retweets, which is really excellent. And I want to give a shout out to a brand, Gazelle Bikes of North America, who's really focusing on their e-bike line. And they, just in the past few weeks, have really upped their social media game on Twitter. And they have posted this from EcoWatch of the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, which Gazelle is from the Netherlands, and how he rides his bike and has ridden his bike for the past 2 years. So again, you're acting as a funnel for the people's interests who follow you that you're passionate about, and you're highlighting things for them and telling the stories of real people. And you can multipurpose your content that way. So again, remember that successful social media is about curating great conversation, likes are a start, but what you really want are retweets. And you want to shift from pushing to engaging, easily create visual allure by sharing images of real people and telling their stories. And then you can better multi-purpose your content by acting as a funnel and reusing things in different ways, but making sure that your photos are sized properly for each application. So now I'm going to ask you guys to unmute yourself and ask me any questions that you have, and also share with me how you could use one of these tips in your social media starting as early as tomorrow.
I guess good. Okay, 2 things to positive. Hi Melissa, this is Mackenzie. I'll start. One question I had while you were speaking was I'm wondering if you had any resources that you use to find content to share from other members within the larger community. If you focus on individual pages, or is there a tool that you have? And then going off of that, is there like a certain time that you spend each morning going through content to see what you should share?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I use Twitter as a personal news feed. And Twitter is where I find the content that I find the most interesting. And the reason that Twitter is the most effective for this is that it moves at the fastest pace. You can literally in 15, 20 minutes every day catch up and find things of interest to you. And it's not a mutual follow. So Twitter, you can follow people. So you can follow people of interest, but it doesn't mean that they're going to have to follow you. You can repost things from Twitter more easily than the other platforms. It's like it's already embedded in it to just share it to your followers. And Instagram, you can do that. Facebook, you can do that, but it takes more time. So that's what I recommend. And I recommend that people follow Pedal Love on Twitter and just give it a go and spend 15, 20 minutes and see who comes up in my news feed that interests you, that you might like to learn from. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. And then I guess the follow-up to that would be, I know that here in my organization, we're working on finding more posts from other advocates within the community to repost that content and elevate their voices rather than just hearing from the work that we're doing. So that is definitely one of the things.
I mean, you're going to find a lot of those in my feed, and you're going to find a lot of and then it's going to lead you to others in that. Because I've been following these people for quite a long time. The other thing I would say to you, as far as looking for stories that are relevant, that are outside in the mainstream media, or what we would call a mainstream media, that relate to us, is to make sure that you're following Grist on Twitter, and make sure that you're following The Guardian. The Guardian has a United States version, and they're doing some of the most progressive things about biking, walking, and transit in the country. So you want to those are two new news outlets. Excuse me. You also want to be following Vox.com, and especially a guy named Dr. Roberts, who is their Seattle-based writer who writes a lot about biking, walking, and public transit. So that's a place that you would start. And I think you asked me about timing. Did you ask me about time of day? Did I misunderstand that?
Yes, I did.
So there are, and I would need to find it for you, and I'll look it up because I wanted to look it up the other day. I'm not remembering. It's one of the social media brand experts has a great infographic about when the best time is to post on for all the different platforms, and I'm not remembering it right now. And it's not necessarily intuitive, so it's pretty interesting because sometimes you think, wow, these people are driving cars, but a lot of your people might be actually sitting on trains in the morning or the evening, so that's why they're looking. So I will track that down and send that to you. But what I would say as far as timing, as far as doing your homework, to spend time doing research when it works for you. And again, because Twitter moves the fastest, that's the one I'm going to recommend, that when you're looking to be a source and start becoming a thought leader, again, that is where the media is, the journalists are that are looking for thought leaders. So if you wanted to start positioning people from Alta to either be regionally thought leaders or nationally thought leaders or even worldwide, Twitter is the place that you would start. So Lisa Peterson, thank you for being here with us today. And did you have any direct questions for me? And if you unmute yourself, we'd love to hear from you. If you're paying attention right now, maybe you're not. And how about Jim? Jim, you want to jump in with some thoughts that you had before that you want to share now?
To the question of where to find stories, one thing that I found useful when I was at Sacramento Area Bicycle Advocates was looking for national or international stories that I could tie back to something that was going on in our community. And I discussed this in a webinar last spring that Melissa and I did together about a Wall Street Journal article that talked about, I think, Tampa having the highest rate of car collisions, I think it was. And I read the article and discovered a reference to Sacramento, and that became the hook that I used to talk about the story on our social media. And I ended up getting 4 media interviews out of it in one day. The reporters who were following our feed saw this this reference to Sacramento in relationship to this presumably national story focused on Florida. And I ended up getting interviewed on the phone by 3 reporters. No, I'm sorry, on the phone by 1 reporter and 3 on-camera interviews in about 24 hours. So that's another thing to think about, is how you can comment on stories from other places and make them and tie them back to your interests and your constituency.
Oh, and that's brilliant because again, that's you being the funnel, right? So you're paying attention and making it personal. Question to you, Jim. Was this just part of your daily reading, or were you using a Google alert or something like that to draw you to that article?
As I recall, I think I saw somebody else posted on Facebook, um, and it would have been a national organization, or it could have been somebody like Alta, but I saw it on their feed and thought it was interesting. I also figured that I guess it related to bike fatalities or something like that, and I figured somebody in our local community would see it and pick it up at some point and talk about it. And so I figured I'd be the first person to do that. And so that's just what made me interested in it. And then as I was reading it, I realized there was this Sacramento angle that I could talk about, and it was the Sacramento angle that ended up getting me 4 interviews. So um, yes, I was the funnel, and it was really in the course of my daily browsing around.
And one of the things I want to point out, and then Lisa is going to jump on, is that I've really decided to spend less time browsing on social media and more time once I see something on Twitter that's of interest to me, that somebody has highlighted, to actually do the deep reading. And it's really paying off for me in terms of learning more, and that let's see if I can learning more. And I'm trying to unblock. Oops, where did you go? I just lost her. Lisa just fell off. Oh no. And I don't know if I'm the one that I may be the one that actually I don't think so. But here she's back again. Okay, let's see if we can get her back. I don't know what's going on here. Sorry about that. What I want to say is that so Lisa, I am so sorry. For some reason, your computer is my webinar platform is saying that you don't have an active mic. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you have a question or comment, can you text it to me, since I'm getting texts from you. So I'm going to ask you to do that. So what I was going to say about this is that we can sort of get overwhelmed and think we need to be looking at social media all the time. And instead, what I'm doing, because a lot of stuff repeats itself on all of the platforms, is just taking the time every day to read like 1 to 3 articles. And then I actually know what I'm talking about instead of just reading a few quotes. And it's really becoming powerful, because especially when I'm focusing on things for climate change, and basically biking, walking, and transit are not at the table yet as far as being front and center. In fact, we need to find a way to get it front and center to the sunrise movement. And it was not in the governor of Washington, Jay Inslee's plan. It's kind of mentioned, but so there's a lot of work for us to do to become media spokespeople and thought leaders. And that's why I'm spending time to do a little more deep research. Okay, so this is from Lisa Peterson, and she says, thanks, Melissa. I recently met with other communications folks at research centers, and the common challenge was making the time to do social media. What helps you to manage this work along with other tasks and projects? It's a great question, because again, I think that we're pulled in so many directions. And what I like to do is take baby steps and bite-sized chews to everything. So I like to say to myself, okay, do I have 15 minutes or 20 minutes a day that I can learn how to use one of these better? And again, I use Twitter the most, but whether it's Instagram or whether it's Facebook, and just say, what are the key things that I want? And again, the key things I think that you want is that you want real conversation engagements rather than just likes. And that happens when you listen more, when you ask questions, when you comment on other people's posts in a thoughtful way that are not just about getting your brand out there or getting yourself out there, but when you ask people something that's of interest to them, you can actually start an online conversation that with people from around the world that will be amazingly helpful to you. But you're right. You've got to say, okay, every day I have this much time, or every week I have this much time, and just stick to that with your goals of what you want to make happen, rather than trying to have huge amount of followers overnight. You really don't need tons of followers. What you need is engaged followers. Because remember, if you have really engaged followers, they're going to take your events, your communications, your ideas, your blogs, and they're going to share them. But if you have 500 or 2,000 sort of engaged people that just kind of glance at your stuff, it's not going to get you anywhere. So really think about a mindful approach to it that's more about engagement, again, rather than pushing. Does that make sense? And I know that we're a little bit over time. So I want to see if anybody has, Mackenzie or Jim, do you have anybody have any final thoughts? I'm so excited that you guys were here with me today. I've been away for 6 months, so it was really fun to be back at this again. And again, I'm going to share this with you, the recording with you afterwards. And we've got, oh, I know that I didn't share with you the links that I've got here. And also tell you that Jim and I will be hosting in a month from now a How to Tell a Story. We're going to be focusing on how to tell a short live story, and we'll be getting the word out to everybody through email newsletters and social media. But I also wanted to share with you the links, and I will share in a follow-up email these links as well, so they'll be live for you. And you can learn more about all these people and these great platforms that make life easier for you. Final thoughts, Jim? Anything you're thinking about as we move forward for next month?
Not yet about next month, but I really appreciate what you're saying about biking and walking not being at the table yet for climate change. It's something that I'm feeling very strongly about, and I'm interested in talking with others about how we can do this together. I can't do it by myself, and probably none of us can, but together we might. So I'm open to hearing more about that.
I think that is one of the most important questions of our time, to be honest with you. And I am just coming out of a long grief process. Many of you know my mother died a few months ago, and so I'm sort of coming back together after that, and my health being challenging. And like you, Jim, I realized I cannot do it all by myself. But as a former PR person, I'm really grappling with how to do this. And this is part of the reason why I'm encouraging all of my talented friends to get on Twitter, because that's where the media is going to find you. And so I think as we move forward into fall, we brainstorm, and maybe it's not always a webinar, but what I'm thinking about is maybe a tweet chat. And Mackenzie, we'd love to connect with you and see how to get more of the Alta team. And Lisa would love to connect with you and see how to get your, the people that that are in communications. How do we get this forward? Here in Washington, I'd like to get in front of Jay Inslee more, and even Martha Ruskowski, who's been so involved in many things, was saying, how do we get this into the conversation in DC? How do we get to the Sunrise Movement? So yeah, Jim, you love the idea of a tweet chat. That's fantastic. So let's close for today with conversations to be kept going on email. I hope to hear from all of you in email if you have other questions that you want to ask me. And I'm going to send out an email newsletter at the beginning of next week and ask people when a good time would be to have a tweet chat about this kind of subject, because I think that would be really fantastic for all of us. So I'm going to end my recording now.